And nature is our teacher, nature is our cathedral, nature is our whatever you want to call it.
Mary Berkery is body-centered soul coach and equine-assisted learning facilitator. Her book, Saved by a Horse, are stories of love, healing, and transformation through horses. Mary is also a TED speaker on the topic Horses as Mirrors.
It still is consistently the same, even though we're bombing each other into oblivion. And go out and let her teach you. Let her seasons teach you. Let her animals teach you. Let the wisdom of how animals live and work together teach you how to be a better human. And even these little creatures here under my desk, they don't hold grudges, and they definitely don't hold history. If I haven't walked them today, they're not going to sit and sulk tomorrow morning.
Digital Audio Health by Simatrax.
Thanks for being here, Mary. It's lovely to see you again.
And so lovely to see you again, Rhonda. And we both knew the last time that there was more to talk about. So here we go.
Here we go. So today you're going to talk about your body of work that has to do with horses and how you have learned how to work with horses in a special way that I haven't heard about. Can you talk to the audience and just give us a brief introduction of what we're going to talk about?
Yeah, I suppose in the same way as in the hippie area, females burnt their bras. I have horses in my world have burnt their bridles and their saddles and their halters and their contraptions, or I have burnt them. And I work at Liberty with horses now, only all at Liberty, everything at Liberty, except, of course, if I need to vet them or shoe them and a horse isn't willing to, or barefoot trim them. But in my work, in my equine assisted work, I work purely at Liberty with the horses, which means that they're not being led, they're not being lunged, they're not being ridden. They're allowed to show up or not actually into a session. Yeah. So
And so is this in an enclosed area like an arena, or is this in outdoors?
it can be in an arena or a field. I don't do it in an enclosed area like a stable, but a round pin or an arena or a field. Yeah.
And so what type of people would come to learn how to work with horses at Liberty, which means do they still have their halter on? No. So no gear at all.
Yeah, well, I still call it equine assisted learning, and I work I run retreats, so I work with horses and retreats with what I call adults. Adults come in my retreats, and the horses are at Liberty. And then with young people, I do equine. A lot of young people coming with anxiety and being bullied in school and stuff that keeps showing up, particularly with young people. All my work is at Liberty. I don't say it's at Liberty. I still call it equine assisted learning. But when they show up, we don't halter them or lead them or and all. I used to do that, but I have slowly progressed from allowing the horse the choice, having it a relationship of mutual respect and knowing that the horse, in fact, I found over and over again that the horse is more intelligent than I, and has more to offer a situation than I as a human can, because the thing I have to bring in more fully is how to create boundaries and how to be cognizant of your space in the presence of this animal, because it is at Liberty. But that's actually part of the learning that people need to learn in this world anyways, about boundaries and being able to take up your own space, particularly if like a child, you're being bullied in school. It's really important to stand up to a horse and say this far, no further, without having to use a whip or a stick or a halter or whatever to keep them away.
Mhm.
So,
And how does it help the teenagers that have problems? Like, how does this work help them?
uh, well, how does the first answer to that question is, how does equine assisted learning help teenagers, whether somebody decides to, do an exercise with a halter or not?
Mhm.
um, is that first of all, most teenagers do not like to talk to humans. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
And they don't want to go into a little square room with two chairs and sit opposite a stranger and say
Mhm.
how they hate themselves, or they hate their peers, or they hate their parents, or whatever, or the anger that's bubbling up inside in them. So that's just being in a natural setting, with animals that don't talk back to them, helps them, in a sense, come down more into their own bodies and beings, and helps them feel what they need to feel. And they don't feel as threatened if they haven't human eyes staring at them. Of course, I'm there in the background. And it basically helps them get in touch with their feelings. And we even see, a dog in a family brings so much its own therapy, particularly for that teenage angsty years. And it's shown, this, Rhonda, anyway, that just by being in the presence of a horse, your heartbeat can change, and you come more into um heart-centeredness, because literally the electrics around a horse's heart is so enormous that just by being in the presence of that frequency, you come out of your busy mind and you come more down here. The piece around liberty, which is really interesting from anyone's point of view, but in teenagers as well, is when you're standing in the presence of this animal that's 10, 15 times the size of you, you have to be more centered in your body to be able to move if the horse moves, because you're not controlling it, you're not controlling its movements. You have to be clear as to what's safe for you and what's not safe for you. So it builds a kind of a body sense awareness when you're not using devices to control this this beast. Because you have to learn, in a sense, to dance and move with the horse and step out of its space if it moves into your space, or keep it back in its space if it's coming too close for you. Because, if a horse's hoof lands on your toe, you know what happens. You can get a pretty black toenail or even a broken toe. So you have to learn very quickly how to, in a sense, move on your feet. In a way that you may not if you're controlling them to a greater or lesser extent. Yeah. And I find, working with young people, so many of them are not in their bodies. They're in these devices and tablets, and to actually start feeling in their bodies, notice when you're uncomfortable and move, feel it in their bellies, is like a whole language for them to start learning. They're not as much in their bodies as, say, my grandparents were, who used to dig potatoes and sow cabbage and kill their own animals and cure their own meat. It's a very different breed of person, a young person now. They're connected to technology, but not actually to themselves in the way that our ancestors were, or to their instinct, because they can get answers at a button on Google or whatever search they're using. Yeah. Being in the presence of an animal that's alive and awake and in the moment brings them into their bodies more fully and alive and awake and in the moment. So,
Yes, that's true. Well, and there's many different aspects that it's going on when you're working with horses. You have to pay attention to if they're going to flick their tail at a fly or stamp because a fly is bothering them or something like that. And knowing that these are normal activities of a horse and nothing to be afraid of, because if you take somebody from the city and bring them into that, they just want to hide around a corner because horses are unpredictable. I mean, we're not talking about working with horses that are 2-year-olds that are full of themselves and want to run and buck and be a 2-year-old. We're talking about horses that have some miles under their with a saddle and a person on them, and then working with them that way, unless of course you raise one right by hand. So horses that are used to responding to human interaction and human commands, right?
Absolutely. I mean, what I do give from a boundary point of view, just to correct myself, is if a person goes into a field with a horse at liberty, they bring what I call a carrot stick. You can get it through the Pat Pirelli thing, and it's a long stick with a little thing on the end of it, and that string, and that makes you, rather than makes you what's the word, perpendicular. When you put that out, you actually are now the shape of the horse. It makes you more the same shape, and the little string at the end is your tail in a sense. And just by waving that, in a very not touching the horse, not whipping the horse, it creates a boundary. And of course, I'm very clear with safety. I teach first, you do not stand directly in front of a horse, you don't stand directly behind. And if you are approaching them, you approach at their shoulders, because even their head, if they just do that with their head, they can break your nose or your jaw. So that the safe place is when you're getting close to them. We do a boundary exercise. You approach their shoulders, so that if they decide to bolt, they're not going to take you with them. And explaining that behind their tail is a blind spot, and if they suddenly see you, they're genetically wired to let fly, because you could be a wolf or a bear or a human killer. So they're wired, they're prey animals. They're flight animals. They're not actually attack animals unless really driven to do so. So there is a safe zone where you approach them at, and you keep that even at liberty. Yeah.
Wonderful. And so do you have a few people that come at one time, or do you just do a single session at a time?
Well, what I do with the young people, I see, particularly young people going through stuff, I see them one at a time, and then I organize groups. And in my retreats, I can have a group in a field, all having different experiences at the same time, and I bring them in with a clipboard. And I think one thing I do when we're letting go of, this is a horse, or even that is a tree, or that is a cat, or that is a dog. It's so good to walk into nature and not put a name on it. Just look at it with, I call it beginner's mind. Just go into a field and sit and just be with this creature that we have called horse. And sit with this sentient being whose heart is, so enormous, who knows how to live in harmony with other horses, even if a stranger arrives in, knows how to live, now knows how to create its own healthy boundaries with other horses, knows its role within the herd, isn't asking what is it going to be when it grows up, knows whether it's taking on the sentinel in the herd, or whether it's the lead horse, or whether it's whether it's the lead, knows who it is instinctively, without having to do any personal development work or human assisted learning, until we of course turn it into something else, which is a whole other story. So they already, and going in a sense, acknowledging that kind of intelligence, and acknowledging they know how to be in harmony with the land, in harmony with the changes in the climate, and in harmony with each other in ways that we have lost. And if we can sit into that and observe that and start connecting to that in ourselves. I mean, one thing I've noticed recently in kind of two encounters, one with a very dear friend of mine where we had a little bit of a hiccup. about something. We were doing some work together and we hiccup, and I said, look, I need to talk to you about this. I'm getting a bit overwhelmed by the amount of times you text me and question me, and I'm trying to communicate with you by email. She went into total reaction because I said that, and later said, any other friend, I'd have dropped you, you know. And I was totally shocked. Maybe I live too much with animals, but I was actually so shocked because I saw it as kind of normal to
Mhm.
have this kind of I won't call it upheaval, but yeah, I
No.
was by the time I spoke to her, I was gone into overwhelm with the way she was
Mhm.
coming at
Mhm.
me. But and this person is actually a psychotherapist, but it was and I was thinking after this, horses know how to literally show teeth at each other and just tell the other one to back off, you're in my space, and then they go back to grazing, and then later they're just grooming each other. They know
Love
how
it.
they know how to feel what they need to feel,
I know.
let it move through them, cleanly, purely. They don't judge it or analyze it, say, oh my God, I was too angry, I was too this, I was too that, I was too much, I was too. And then they go back, then it's over. And even that alone, just observing how they behave with
Mhm.
each other in a field, just doing that can be so, oh my God, it's okay to say what I feel. It's okay to express it. It's okay to say, hey, can we talk about this? But we are so sort of,
Layered.
and then if a horse in the equine assist in the equestrian world, rather,
Mhm.
if a horse has attitude, we try to numb it down and dumb it down and put two bits on them and, whatever we do to kind of,
Mhm.
in a sense, or kill its spirit, in a sense. That's what we're doing. Kill this innate, what Pat Pirelli's word is horsenality. I love it. The horse's horsenality. We have personalities, they have horsenalities. But um, so that alone, just has been such an eye opener for me. How can we humans learn from horses how to share from our hearts when it isn't, fluffy and nice and gorgeous,
Mhm.
and embrace it with equanimity, and look at the world we're in. It's so polarized and dualistic, and this is right and this is wrong and this is black and this is white. So just sitting in a field, observing that, and say, where have I put lids on what I'm needing to feel and express with my herd, my human herd.
Mhm. Mhm. Well,
So
when horses have a disagreement in the past, they're not thinking about all the other disagreements that they had and piling them on top of each other.
exactly.
But it's the human psyche that you must have triggered something in that person, and then they've got layers and layers and layers on that response that they give back, which it seems like it's an overkill for the situation, but it's what triggers them. And and I mean, horses are triggered by if they see a person who's treated them really poorly, they will go the other way in the paddock. I mean, they will not be, friendly in the paddock because they do remember, and they do remember mistreatment, which is a different subject, but they do remember and they stay away from that person or run from that person because I've known stories about that.
Yeah.
You know,
And also,
so a trainer with a heavy hand, right?
yeah, and also if they've been physically abused by, a male or a female who wears a hat,
Yeah.
then somebody comes in wearing a hat who isn't that
Mhm.
person, and they can get triggered by that. So they do carry trauma and memory for sure.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely. And in equine assisted learning, it can be amazing what how a person is attracted to a horse, or the horse is attracted to that person, the way
Mhm.
the horse is either making eye contact with that person or vice versa. And then you realize they have a similar story around, boundaries being broken or something. I mean, my very first experience, my very, very first equine assisted learning experience was in Colorado. And of course, I grew up as you've said in your introduction. I sat on a horse when I was 2. I rode bareback until I was 12 on donkeys and ponies in my aunt's farm, and then my father got me a pony when I was 12. And then I hate the word, but I'll use it. We broke that pony together, and now it's a terrible word. Even the word is just cringe making. The Monty Roberts word is we join up. But I did. Broke the pony, bitted it and put on the long reins and drove it up and down the road. And then showed it and had double bits, snaffle and a curb for the showing so that they'd look prettier. All that. So I've been down that whole road. But anyway, then I left that, went to Dublin, got involved in the whole wellness business and ran my own business for 25 years, and then sold my business in 2010. And the only thing I wanted to do was equine assisted learning because of this story that I'm just about to tell you. In the year 2000, I think I was living in Colorado, and I'd heard about these 2 psychotherapists who are working with horses in an arena, and they were taking their practice out of this room. And like, oh my God, it was like, does not compute with my equestrian background of hunting and event. And I just said, I have to go meet these people. There were a couple in horse medicine program in Boulder. And the first they did an assessment in a room and then brought me out, and I had to choose a horse. And I can't remember the details whether the horse chose me or I chose the horse, but I chose this big gray horse. And he gave me an exercise to rub the horse it's just stay connected with my body, stay conscious of keep feeling my feet on the ground, staying with my breath, staying with my body, but slowly rub the horse's body with my bare hands. And it was like even that exercise alone was a kind of an unlearning, because I used to go and I have to groom the horse. So I'm doing this to the horse. I wasn't kind of in this staying conscious of myself while I'm taking care of while I'm doing. So this one I had to be 100% conscious of me and the horse at the same time. And as I got to the horse's rump, all these memories just flooded in of sarcasm growing up, where the ground would be cut out from under me with very sarcastic words. Oh, there's only sour milk running around in your head, and you wouldn't last a day in a job, and nobody could live with you. If I questioned my father and anything he did on the farm, these were the answers that I got back. So nobody could live with you, and then there was the right way, the wrong way, and his way of doing things, and you had to kind of figure out what was his way. So it was quite a tight situation to be dancing around. And all the words came back, but I could feel them in my hips, as if they lodged into the muscles of my hips, and the tears started pouring down my face. And I had done psychotherapy on this, but it was more, I talked about it as if I'm talking about a movie I went to last week or something. Here I was actually feeling the words and feeling how they lodged into my body. And as I felt them, I could feel my muscles softening and melting. And it was just a profound experience. It was, and the tears pouring, and the words, and feeling the shock of these words in my body. And then afterwards, I found out that this horse was being taken to the factory. When Craig Falkman and Diane Kennedy were the psychotherapists, and he was about to be taken to the factory because they couldn't load him on a box. He just wouldn't be boxed, or as maybe you say in the States, trailered. I'm not sure which
trailered, yes.
And they used to whip him across his rump with every kind of device to try and get him up onto the trailer. And he ended up flat refusing. So here he was with trauma in his rump from being so whipped to try and be trailered. And here my trauma, from words, from being whipped in a sense with words. And it was like this beautiful connection happening on a frequency level that we were both healing our traumas at the same time, in a sense, or where they got lodged in us at the same. It was and I was sold. I ended up, the book is there behind me. It's behind that green one. I ended up buying Linda Kavanagh's book came out, The Tao of Equus. And I came back to Ireland in 2011 and 2001, and just read the book 4 or 5 times because it was the only book that was out there at the time. And then in 2010 sold my business and said, this is the work I want to do. So that's just an example of the horse having trauma and the person and a good fit for each other. I have another beautiful story, but maybe later.
It's as though you were both on the same frequency level. And so while you were crying and you were processing your fear, the horse's remembrance of how he was whipped and you at his rump brushing or whatever, he would have those sensations until the day he died, right? Because that's traumatic. And so that's very interesting. And probably you've touched on something that is extraordinary, really, because first of all, to even be in the conscious awareness to connect all of that together is astounding, because another person would just keep on going and hide their feelings for one thing, right? That's what we're good at. Let's just keep those tears back and just hide our feelings. But I really commend you for sharing that, because it helps other people realize that these types of things are healing, and hopefully they will source out someone who is in the same field as you are, and if in your country, which is England, go and see you for trauma. So when you speak about teenagers and they have all these different problems, when they start working with horses, is it the same kind of process that you feel from them that they go through? I mean, it doesn't take one session to heal and melt these teenage hearts. It probably takes a few, does it?
Well, it's in my book. I have most of my stories in my book is my work with young people. And I'm just thinking a story that's not in my book, and it's not even a story of a young girl. She was two brothers, they kind of bullied her. And even though I work with Liberty and we work with Liberty, and she really connected, but what she actually connected to, Rhonda, was her love of horses. And as a she came to me, I think, 3 times, and she was suffering from anxiety, and that definitely shifted through her, even through the 3 sessions of me. She suddenly realized, can't remember the details, but there was she realized that she was okay just as she was, because that horse was okay just as it was and wasn't making any apologies. But I actually encouraged her to go and work in a stable and go into a livery yard and start working with horses, even though it's not where I want to go anymore. And she then left me and is now getting riding lessons and around horses, and her life is totally transformed just by being around them. So that's just an example of 3 sessions with me gave her the confidence to be around them at Liberty, in a sense. And that led her to, and she's on her journey, and she may get to Liberty at some point in her life, but right now it's really important for her, especially with 2 boys who bully her, to be around big animals, because that'll help her develop her confidence, whether she's mucking out a stable or whether she's giving them hay or whether she's even riding them. So I know this isn't, so that's just one example. What I find, I mean, it's all different. I mean, I had one teenager come to me. She came about, was it 5 or 6 times, but one session was just pivotal. She suffered with eating disorder, And it's in the book, and it's very, I don't want to kind of waste time on it, but she just, again, because I'm working at Liberty and like in my training, you should not have a horse in a field eating if you're doing an equine assisted learning session. You know what I mean? That's the training. Get them into an arena where it's all sand, and keep them away from grass so that they're totally focused on the client. But this girl came and she'd gone away for a weekend with her parents, and there was a load of food, and she arrived totally stressed about how is she going to manage life, with food on the tables, and it's really, 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 really stressed about it all. I'm kind of skipping through the story, and she found it was a bank holiday weekend, and to make a very long story short, and she picked a horse, and the horse, as soon as she went into the arena, the horse started grazing. So I actually decided to bring the horse into the arena because it wasn't giving her any attention whatsoever. As it went into the arena, it literally stuck its head out under the railing and started eating the grass on the edge. So then I just asked her the question, what was it like to have the horse totally focused on food rather than on you? And she suddenly got, that's what I was like over the weekend. I was totally focused on how if I eat too much food, I'm going to get ugly, and if I eat too much food, I'm going to get fat. And she said, I actually wasn't present to the people I love. In fact, she said, I wasn't even nice to be around. And she suddenly got her behavior because the horse was mirroring this obsession with food, in a sense, back to her. Even in a sand arena, was still managing to get its head under the railing and keep eating. And that was a pivotal point in our 5 sessions together, or 6 sessions together. And there was another one where she just sat down on the ground and lay into a horse. But she suddenly got what this eating fixation is making. Instead of trying to be more attractive, she's actually less attractive without suddenly.
Yeah, well, those are excellent stories, and it's a way to describe the assisting that horses can do and the therapy that they can do, because we're so busy with our lives. It's really hard for us to tune into those vibrational energies, but the horses and dogs and cats, they can tune into that. And that horse probably felt that that person needed to eat, and he started to get hungry. And so he just kept eating and eating. But what a revelation. I mean, these are great teaching moments for people.
Incredible. And I think what you said earlier, Rhonda, above and beyond, I mean, I could cite stories here. I have one incredible story that happened in an equestrian center in the Caribbean, actually, but they live in the moment. And
In
there's
the
a
moment.
purity, and there's no history.
Mhm.
There's no, I had an argument last week with my partner, and he brought up, and you did this, and you did that then. And I said, please, can we not deal with history and just deal with what's up right now? I said, because I actually said, because inside I'm a horse. I may show up as a human, but inside I'm a horse. And I said, can we just deal with this thing here that I have reacted to, and leave the rest? If you haven't dealt with the rest, talk about it later, but not right now, So I've kind of ended up saying, can we make this a ground rule, please? If you need to
Well, I mean, yeah, but human beings stack things on top of other
we
things
don't,
and then we
terrible.
blow, right? Well, I don't do it, but I have seen people do
Yeah,
that. They
we're
stack instead of dealing with things as they come up. We start
exactly.
harboring stuff, and it's bad for our bodies. I mean, it's dumping really bad.
And it's bad for each other because
It's bad for each other.
it's bad. It's let it go. And what does I listened to Zach Bush. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a doctor. He's a medical doctor. I think he lives in Hawaii. And listen to me, a little short. I put it up on my Facebook. That the frequency of forgiveness is just so huge if we can just let it go, and the clock will come round again with this person or with the situation. It'll be the same thing. It will be the same thing in a different guise. Just deal with that thing. It keeps it clean. And I mean, I have 2 dogs here under my desk, and And when they're sick, they're sick. And then when they're better. And they're not dragging the flu they had 2 months ago around on their back, or whatever. And if they hurt themselves, they'll just shiver and they'll shake and they'll do their business, and then it's over. And oh my gosh, if we humans could do that, if we could just emotion, the energy in motion, if we can just let it come through and out and clean and clear and be like a child, just cry and then get back laughing again. If we could, I think we'd have a saner world. And say better relationships and cleaner relationships and healthier relationships and healthier with ourselves, because we're not harboring all unresolved sort of whatever, I know, okay, stuff happened in our childhood that we had to put lids on, of course. And there was a time and a season to deal with that, like my experience with my first equine assisted learning experience, with stuff that had got stored up in there, And yes, somebody will look at me crooked and it'll hit my Achilles heel, of course, but still stay with that. Stay with the feeling that I'm feeling right now around whatever that person said or didn't say or could have said or should have said or whatever. Sorry if I'm on a rant here, but be as clean and as clear as an animal would be in that situation. Even if they're carrying trauma around somebody with a hat coming into the arena, they'll still deal with it in the moment and feel it in the moment. And yeah, anyway, ask me a question, Rand.
Well, the analogy is incredible because, our listeners, I mean, they're going to say, holy smokes, I never thought of that. I mean, people who have horses, they may not even be in tune to that. I mean, you've seen careless horse people who are unconscious when they're around horses, no matter what. I mean, they just are.
Careless and unconscious, and I've come in with this human arrogance. The dumb animal, and I'm here to make it obey. And I had a bad accident as a result of that, which was a huge equine assisted learning. I was even qualified at the time. So I mean, because we're coming out of this paradigm of domination over the land, over our bodies, over countries, and particularly over animals, domination over, rather than partnership with and respect of mutual respect. And these animals, I mean, we're talking about equines, they've been here millions of years, over 3 million years or 3 billion years, and we're here over a couple of 100,000 years, and we still come in with, you dumb creature, I'm here to dominate you.
Wow. Yeah, and it's a whole washover period, but we're moving out of the Piscean age into the age of Aquarius, and we're mostly in age of Aquarius, and that's the feminine. And so it's the softer hand. It's the, our intuitive abilities. And I'm not saying that men don't have them. They certainly do have them, but we also have intuitive abilities, and the longer and the more often we're around animals, the more intuitive we can become. I remember, I haven't had an animal for quite some time, but my last one was a feline, and I rescued her. And all I had to do was to look at her with my eyes and place my eyes on the sofa beside me, and she would jump up and run over and jump up and sit exactly where my eyes told her to sit. I mean, this is how intimate we can become with animal. And of course, I spent years in the horse industry. I saw things that were deplorable with what people were doing with horses. And so, I mean, I'm really glad that I'm really glad that this is out there and people all around the world can start doing this equine assisted learning. And
yeah, my first communication for an animal, and I think we all have it in us. Sorry, Rhonda, I did interrupt you there.
No, please continue.
Yeah, we have it in us. It's just got covered up, but we have it in us to be. There's a wonderful South African woman, Anna Brackenbach. She calls herself an interspecies communicator, and she's beautiful, beautiful woman. And she opened up to it when she lived in California, where she went out at night tracking the footprints of wild animals, and she was in the IT business, and suddenly she'd put her hand into this footprint and she'd get this image in her mind, and she'd say, I see a dog with kind of spiky hair. And of course, she'd never seen a coyote. She's South African. And the man who was trekking with her said, you've seen a coyote in your mind's eye. So she started suddenly getting these hits when she'd kind of go to her. But anyway, but she says that we have it in us. We all have it in us. And well, my first experience of communication from a horse was actually a horse who had died, but it's in the book, okay? But this one was this was my third one of a horse communicating with me. And I had now moved from not using bits. I'd stopped using bitless bridles. I was transitioning slowly from my equestrian background. And then I started doing research into saddles and how uncomfortable they are on a horse. And particularly this part of their back is literally the base of their neck and the tree. And if it's not, so I ended up buying a felt saddle. With the stirrups. So okay, I'll get a felt saddle, it's more comfortable. And I had a white cob, a Connemara cob called Freddie, and Freddie was from a riding school. And when I got him, and he came to I had two mares, a chestnut mare, the cover of the book, and a beautiful black pony her name was Tara, but she was a Buddha, really. But anyway, he was the man about town with the two women. Do you know what I mean? He really, and even though he was gelded, and he was just the stallion, and he and the chestnut they were constantly grooming each other. And then Tara was allowed to be off on her own as she wanted to be, and she wasn't my heart had come together when he arrived, and he was in heaven, and he gained weight, and he was prancing around the place. He's acting sort of like a stallion.
Wonderful.
And it was just beautiful to see him blossoming, okay? And he was also, because he was a very safe ride in the school, and because I now was coming out of having had an accident with my chestnut, I decided I put the bitless bridle on him, and I brought him in, put the bitless bridle on him, put my new felted saddle on him, and as soon as I tied the girt, it's like as if every ounce of wind left his body and his head dropped, and he became half the size that he was. That's what it looked like. It was like, like this. And I kind of looked and I said, Freddie, what's up? And I heard clearly, Rhonda, without words, I don't want to be ridden, but if I do, I'm safe. Clearly, as clear as you're talking. It wasn't words, but it was as clear as you asked me.
Communication.
It was heart to heart. I don't want to be ridden, but if you do, I will be a safe ride. So it was this beautiful continued service to me and care of me, and yet expressing, his need. And I was just like, I literally took off my felted saddle and never put it on again. That was my first step towards moving. And then a couple of months later, I had Stormy May visited me in Ireland. She's written, I highly recommend this, The Path of the Horse. She was a dressage teacher, and the whole thing kind of got dried up for her. She decided to take a sabbatical and look at what people were doing differently. And she, like me now, doesn't use anything. And I told her my story. I told her what happened, and she said, it's because you're opening to this. He knew he could communicate this to you, and then she said something that I will never forget. And it was another step in the direction of, she said, when you put a halter on a horse, you have a different relationship with it.
Oh, yeah.
And it would be a bit like if I decided to handcuff you and say, we're going shopping.
I wouldn't like it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't like it a bit. And I just wanted to reflect back to what I was speaking about. And I mean, the reason we're alive is because we had those innate abilities, and men especially had to know where the game was in order for everybody in the household to eat. And so they definitely had those abilities too. And I think that as our world has progressed, like you have said, that we've lost them because we don't feel like we need them until we're in a situation that we do and wonder where they went. And so the more you use them, the more you have them. I'd like to recognize my sponsor. This podcast has been treated with digital audio health by my sponsor, Simatrax. And I'd like to ask you to let the audience know you have something coming up here. You have a retreat coming up here. Can you let the audience know about that?
I live in Ireland, in the west of Ireland, and I run retreats here. And of course, I run retreats bringing people to the ancient Celtic sites, as well as equine assisted learning, as well as journaling and meditation. And we're doing this podcast in January, but I want to flag a really 5-day retreat in September 2025 for the autumn equinox. And I'll be putting that out pretty soon. You'll get it on my website. And
what is your website?
maryberkery.com. I think it's there on underneath my name. I think maryberkery.com. And I also work online, Rhonda, with people, like, even if you have a dream of a horse, that can, and to work with that with my soul coaching can be incredibly powerful. In fact, I had a reoccurring dream when I moved to Dublin and ran a business. I had a reoccurring dream over and over again, and I didn't have the wherewithal to analyze it. Where my horses were in my ponies. I grew up on a farm. I left the farm, moved to the city. But in the dream was my ponies were in the field and they were thirsty, and I used to wake up in a total sweat. And it took me about 3 or 5 minutes to realize it's a dream. You've left the farm. Those ponies are no longer there. They're not thirsty. You don't need to get them water, or they were hungry. It was a constant reoccurring dream. And I said, oh God, what am I going to do? And then, oh, Mary, it's a dream. You're living in Dublin. The farm, you left the farm 5 years ago. But it was a constant dream. What I realized was, by not being with, in a sense, my own instinctual nature, my own horse body, I wasn't feeding, I wasn't watering or feeding that deep, wild part of myself. I was in a business world. I had 15 people working for me. It actually didn't really suit me, even though I'd gone down that road. But this dream was telling me this, but I hadn't the people or the persons. Then when I did leave the farm, actually, I did go working. I studied dreams in New Mexico. That's a whole other piece. So if a person has any dream, or they even have a vision of a horse, or they keep feeling a call to be with horses, they can start by doing that online, and writing about it and journaling into it. And then I give them some directions to where they can go physically to be around them. So I do quite a lot of that online as well. And it's a bit late now, but I may run a March equinox retreat, but I don't think so, because in my personal life, a lot has opened up where I'm going to be living part of the time in Ireland and part of the time in Italy, if you don't mind. So my March retreat is axed because of that, actually. So I will be running a September retreat in Ireland, in the west of Ireland.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, thanks.
Called Coming Home to Your Soul.
Coming Home to Your Soul. Wonderful. Beautiful.
In this Courting Your Soul podcast.
Yeah.
You might come.
I might come. Yeah, I don't think so. My schedule is pretty packed for sure. But perhaps one day, Mary.
Yes, it would be lovely to connect with you in person.
Yes.
Maybe that's the third round.
Maybe that's the third round. Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much for being a guest on the show again, Mary. It's been a pleasure to be in your company and to listen to your wisdoms and your stories. And it's through storytelling that the teaching takes place, because when we storytell, people relax and listen to the story and make the connections on their own instead of doing a point form, right?
And also, I think, Rhonda, just to complete, that the world we're living in, is becoming, I think you were saying about Aquarius, and Pluto also has moved into Aquarius. So that's also bringing a huge cleansing and the awakening of a more softer feminine way. But in that birthing, there's an awful lot is going to be happening in a kind of a negative sense, So it is kind of insane. It is an insane world, really and truly, to be in.
It's a pair of opposites, right?
It's a crazy planet to be on. And I definitely would encourage anybody who's listened to this point, get out into nature, get out into nature, sit into a tree, watch the patience of a tree going through the season. Look at your cat, look at your dog, look at it with a beginner's mind. See how incredibly tuned in it is to you as a person, to its environment. Go out, observe a herd of deer or horses or whatever, and see how their way how awake and aware that even a bird, how awake it is, and because that's where we have, that's still a sane world. That's still a sane, not in the abattoirs or not in the factories where they're being reared or the horrible places that we farm them in, but get out into where they are in nature and in the wild and sit with them and observe them and just see how they interact with each other. I was in Italy actually 2 weeks ago and saw this incredible murmuration with starlings. 3 lots, there were thousands. I was so bowled over by it, I couldn't even video it because I felt they were blessing me with something. They were actually coming to give me something. And nature is our teacher. Nature is our cathedral. Nature is our, whatever you want to call it. It still is consistently the same, even though we're bombing each other into oblivion. And go out and let her teach you. Let her seasons teach you. Let her animals teach you. Let the wisdom of how animals live and work together teach you how to be a better human. And even these little creatures here under my desk, they don't hold grudges, and they definitely don't hold history. If I haven't walked them today, they're not going to sit and sulk tomorrow morning. So thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, thank you so much, Mary. Great wisdom. Thank you. Thank you for listening to Courting Your Soul with Rhonda Grant, whose podcast has been treated with digital audio health by my sponsor, Simatrax. Theme song for Courting Your Soul is Sun on the Water, composed and performed by John Park Wheeler.